Hello, everyone. Just give you a few minutes there. Make sure you can all get in. Hello, everyone. My name's Karina Urquhart. I'm the Executive Director at BIC and your host for this BIC Brunch event today, which is actually a continuation, or part two, if you like, of the session we did in December last year, which was on Thema Qualifiers. Given all the questions that we received at that event, we thought it would be a good idea and probably wise to devote a deeper dive session dedicated 100% to your Q&As on the same topic. So it's a bit of a different approach for BIC this time round. So we normally have quite a structured approach with slides, presentations, etc. But this time we're going freestyle. So we'll see how that works out. So we're skipping the presentations and we're going straight in with the questions on the technicalities and the applications of Thema qualifiers and any other Thema questions that may come up, but trying to focus primarily on qualifiers. So just some housekeeping today then before we get started. So as I've said, the purpose of today is Q&A. So we do want to hear from you. We've got some questions from some of you already. So thank you for those if you submitted those when you registered. And if there is something you'd like us to cover and you've got a burning question, please do use the Q&A box that you should have on your screen. If you can't see it immediately in your toolbox, for those of you not familiar with Zoom, it should be, if you click on the three little dots, it should come up as an additional item. I'll put it in the chat box if you prefer to do that. So we're recording this event today, but don't worry, you won't be identified in the recording, and we promise we won't call out your name from the Q&A if you don't want to go in as anonymous. And we'll share the recording with all of you later on and post it to our YouTube channel in about a month or so. Just a gentle reminder that BIC is a neutral membership organisation, and so we would politely remind all attendees and our speakers as well to avoid any conversations or questions that might be considered commercially sensitive or anti-competitive. And finally, please note, unfortunately, we can't respond to questions that ask our experts to classify individual titles. I'm sure you'll appreciate that the decision-making processes and specific in-depth content knowledge for those will lie within your own organisations. However, we're very happy to take questions on general principles, applications, general advice and guidance. So talking in generalities rather than specific ISBNs. So I hope that's okay. And finally, a social media mention. Please feel free to share any updates on this session if you'd like to our Blue Sky account. The address is on your screen. And just to remind you that we're not on Twitter or X anymore. So if you're on Blue Sky, do come and find us. So then, a bit about us. For those of you who don't know who we are, just before we get started. So who are we? So BIC is a UK-based members organisation at the heart of the supply chain and heart of the book industry, creating standards, best practices and resources for our members, but also for the wider industry. We help organisations become more efficient, save money, become less wasteful and ultimately greener. We hold a unique position of trust, facilitating UK and international industry-wide collaboration to reach agreement on dependable standards and best practice in the supply chain. How do we do that? We do that in a variety of ways. So one of which, or several of which, are running 5 strategic committees focusing on distinct areas, so libraries, metadata, physical, digital, and green supply chains. We offer training events and workshops and also execute supply chain related projects for and on behalf of our membership and the wider industry. We also operate 3 industry recognised accreditation schemes. Our overarching mission is to create order out of chaos. And you can find a lot more about what we do on our website, a lot more information, a lot of free resources in the resources tab as well. So that's enough about BIC for now, anyway. So I will stop sharing my screen any minute and introduce our speakers. So I think I'm still sharing my screen. Let me just see how to stop sharing. Can't just see that just yet. But anyway, nonetheless, let's introduce our speakers for today. So we've got Wave, I call that your name. So we've got Liam Herbert, subject classifier at Nielsen IQ Book Data. Adam Hewson, company director at Hewson Books. And Chris Sainer, standards editor at Editor. So I will, as we go, try and work out how to stop sharing. Oh, there we go. School for the Gifted. So bear with me. Right, so questions. So while we're waiting for our attendees to put some questions in, although we may have already got some, we have already got some, which is great. I'm just going to start with some warm-up questions just to get the juices flowing, get the creative brain going. So let's go back to basics, really. What are qualifiers? Why are they important? And which are the ones that are listed for Thema? So I'm going to go to Chris for that first question, if I may. Over to you.
Thank you, Karina. Welcome, everyone. So Thema qualifiers are special codes that you can use to expand the scope of the subject categories. Thema is split into two parts: subject category codes, which are things that you're very aware of, things like history, philosophy, science. And then the qualifiers are there to give you an extra level of detail, because Thema basically works as a building block approach to creating subject codes. It's not a pre-coordinated system. We haven't already put things together into a predetermined shelf label. So if you look at the art section, for example, we don't have a Renaissance art subject heading. We have history of art, and we have a Thema qualifier for Renaissance styles, for example.
Okay, thank you. And then what are they actually, what should I be using them for? And who would use them? Publishers, retailers, who are they aimed at? And what should I be using them for?
So I'll take that. Everyone should be using them in the supply chain. So a publisher should be assigning them, and then the retailer can make use of them. You don't need them on every single title, because there are some subjects that don't need that extra level, but they are incredibly powerful when you do use them correctly. So they allow people to do filtering. There are 6 types of qualifiers, just to remind everybody. One's place qualifier. So your book is set in this place or is about this place. Language, 2. The book is about this language, for example, learning this language, not in the language, obviously, that's elsewhere. 3, time period qualifiers. So the book is about this period of time or set in this period of time. 4, educational purposes. What is it for in the educational sector? Is it for primary education, secondary education? 5, interest qualifiers, which have a lot of different things in them. And then 6 are the style qualifiers.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think that might be a good place to introduce our very exciting poll. So we're just going to ask the audience, just for fun. You'll be anonymous, you won't be identified. So after listening to what Chris has said, which Thema qualifiers do you currently use? Just a bit of fun. We can't see who's saying what anyway. So well, let's have a look and see what happens. So tick all that apply, and we'll leave it running for a few seconds. Oh, keeps changing. It's very interesting. Let's see if there's any that aren't. No, we do have some. We've got about 30, keeps changing. 33% don't use qualifiers. So that's very interesting. Is just give it a few, it has moved. We'll just give it a few seconds to see if anybody wants to add anything else. Otherwise, in about 5 seconds, I'll ask Joe to end the poll and just share the results, the final results. So give it about 5 seconds. Okay. Joe, would you like to end the poll and just share the results on screen? Great. Very interesting. So yeah, 35% don't use any qualifiers. So you've come to the right place. And it seems to be in the lead, we have place qualifiers and time period qualifiers, followed closely by interest qualifiers. Yeah. Anything to comment on these just from the panel?
From my point, I can see why place and time period are up the higher because obviously they're very useful for
Yeah.
settings. So,
Yeah. Okay.
Liam might want to.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Just say it's a pleasure to be invited and speaking at this BIC Brunch webinar today. Just to kind of echo what Chris has said, I'm not entirely surprised to see that place and time period qualifiers are the most used. It's interesting to see that not far behind is interest qualifiers, and it's something that I hope to be able to talk to you more about as we go through today's webinar, as an area of growth almost in terms of new Thema qualifier codes have been added in on the last release of Thema. I think it is quite unsurprising to see that, and also quite brave and honest for 35% of you saying that you're not using any qualifiers at all. I'm hoping that from today's session, we can change that so that you are always at least considering the application of Thema qualifiers, so that you can enhance your classification data to make your books more discoverable.
Absolutely. Definitely. And I'd also like to say that in terms of the Q&A, please don't be shy. There are no such things as silly questions. So if you are, well, not just one of those 35%, but anybody on the call today, and you've got a question that you think, should I ask or will I? We're not going to identify anyone, and there are no stupid questions. So don't be shy. Okay, I'll stop sharing that now. Come out of there. So we'll just go with the sort of the warm-up introduction questions for a little bit longer. Do I need to use qualifiers for every book? Every book that I publish, every ISBN?
No.
No. When wouldn't I use them?
There are lots of cases where medical books, for example, there aren't any qualifiers with a few exceptions that apply for them. It's when qualifiers work, when they're applicable, they're good, but you don't need them for everything. No.
Yeah. Okay. And where do I go to find these? Where do I find the qualifiers? Where do I find?
So I think it's better if I'm going to say something, but I think the others will have other things to add to this. So from an editor point of view, editor, the organization that manages Thema, you can find lots of information on our website. But what I recommend to absolutely everybody is to have a link to the browser, which we'll be sharing with you, and also download the code list as an Excel. The browser is designed to improve your search. We've done a lot of work on it, and it's a really good tool. The Excel, just because it's an easy way to get an overview of different areas, because you can see the whole structure in a tabular form. And I just think it's visually quite a good way to look at things. But I'm sure Liam will then have some other things to add on to that.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so as Karina mentioned at the top of the introductions, I am a subject classifier and I work for Nielsen IQ book data. So I kind of describe my job as being a Thema ally to the publishing industry. So we're very much here to help ensure that the classification data that is sent through to us is of the highest quality and most accurate that it can be. And in order to do so, for our clients, we do have Thema codes, not quite as good as the browser. I will say that the browser is amazing and it should be your first point of call. But we do have inbuilt into some of our products the ability to do searching for Thema via keyword or searching via the hierarchy. As hopefully everyone is aware, Thema is a very complex hierarchical scheme, and there's a lot to find if you really dig deep enough. So, yes, there are ways of being able to browse and search Thema if you're using products that Nielsen IQ uh, are kind of supplying, but there are many other ways, as Chris mentioned, that you can have this wonderful scheme and its information available to you.
Thank you. And I should add the link to the browser has now gone into the chat, just to alert our attendees. Adam, did you have anything to add about how to find the qualifiers, how to discover the most suitable at all?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm an independent bookseller, probably a little unusual because I'm a very high-end user on how all these things work. But I'll speak on behalf of the booksellers who don't get a lot of this stuff and just take it as part of the magic that works behind how bookselling works. We don't necessarily get, although we can get an Excel spreadsheet of all the Thema codes, but day to day, that's not how we would do it. We would get our information from the publishers via Nielsen, perhaps, or BDS, or Gardeners, or whoever provides our data for our system. Also, we'll see it on publishers' AIs and things like that. We don't have any influence on what goes on there. We're just a user. If the information's good, we get it. If the information's not there, we don't get it. So it's quite critical for us to be able to see that. Obviously, the first thing we do when we see a book in our bookshop is we look at the book itself and then make a decision ourselves. But there are a lot of books that we really don't know about or could improve. And that's where on one end we can look at how Thema is it's categorized by Thema. Second thing we can do is if we're researching books for customers, we can use Thema codes to do that. So if we needed to put a particular place or a particular qualifier to find out what books are there based in Verona, for example, we could get that information. It's not the easiest thing to do, but we can do that. So that's very useful. Again, if and only if the information's there. The third thing that we can do, and that's for bookshops with online presence where we have a website, because generally we have in a bookshop, we have one book in one place, but on a website, Theme allows us to have a book in many places and many different ways of looking for that book so that customers on the web can discover and ideally buy the book. Because that is my entire purpose, is how can we use this to sell more books?
Okay. And while we're talking about bookstores, Adam, how do you see and then apply the Thema code or the qualifiers that you get through? How do you, in practice, how do they translate to your either your online presence or your in-person bookshop?
So in person, if I'm with a customer and we needed to find a book about a subject, we can use our data suppliers to use those codes. We need to know what the codes are first, and then be able to plug it into the search engine to find something. So if somebody says books on bullying, we can use bullying as an example using the Thema codes. because it's how many books on bullying have bullying in the title. So that is a struggle if it's a subject, and that's where we can use qualifier there. Or as I said, we could put something like a place to find a place. Books, fiction books, because someone's going on holiday and this is where they're going, and they want to read a book that's going to put them in the mood. And we either have to remember those fiction titles, or we could use the theme category to do that. On the website, on the other hand, we can download the information from our data supplier, and then make the decision on how we want to use those. Now, we don't absolutely use those codes black and white to say, these are the Thema codes, these are what they are on our website. We tend to map over and say, I don't know, something about sport, for example, if we can have a sports section, but if there's something like sport down the hierarchy would go through all games through to football and rugby. Now, we might have football and rugby on our website, but it's unlikely we're going to have baseball and basketball, just because in Britain we don't have enough books on it. So we would keep those weirdly in a higher up category that's higher up in the hierarchy. However, for the shop, we would just use the sport category for dealing with that. I appreciate that's not qualifiers, but that's how the hierarchy works for us. We choose from the Thema codes which ones we want to use and explore.
Yeah, because you can't have as many shelves as there are Thema codes and qualifiers, I guess. That would be a very big bookshop.
Indeed.
So the next thing I want to go on to before we dive into the questions that are coming through on this session, I want to talk about two things. So I want to talk about numbers of qualifiers, as in how many, and also order. What order should things go in? The code, Thema code, qualifiers, etc. What are the rules? Are there rules? So if we look first out, we've had a few questions in on that really are order questions. So let's start with those first. So, is there an order? So does order matter for qualifiers? And if it does, is there a maximum? Is there a minimum? I'm assuming that it wouldn't be a minimum, but is there a maximum? So, and do they have to go before the subject category codes? Do they come after the subject category codes? Is there an order that the qualifiers themselves should go in? So who wants to take that first? So Chris, would you like to talk to that one?
So you have to understand what Thema is. Thema is a system of codes designed to be sent from machine to machine. And so you put them in the metadata. Quite often you might put them in an Onyx file, an XML file. You might send them via Excel or some other system. If you are sending them via Onyx or an Excel, you will designate one subject category to be the primary, principal, or main subject. You also can do that for each type of qualifier. You will designate one, basically saying, if you're only going to use one of these, use this one. It's standard practice. You will do that as well if you use bisect codes. Any scheme where you would send more than one value, you designate one as the main one. The others, no order. There's no order to them, because you might put them in different columns in your Excel, but there's no meaning in the order, because Thema doesn't have a grammar. If any of you have worked in library studies, you'll maybe familiar with universal decimal classification, where I think it's usually a term you need in library school to learn how to use it properly, because there's a whole set of different grammars and things. That's far too complicated. So no, order does not matter. Just designate one subject category and one of each qualifiers as main, and that's it.
Thank you. On order again, another question we've had in is, should fiction narrative theme codes, e.g. FXD, be placed after the normal subject code, or does the order not matter? I think you may have already answered that
It
question.
doesn't matter, because if you're putting them in something like an XML file, an Onyx file, your system could put them in any order, and then the people who receive them could put them in any order. Hence, that's why you have a flag, some way to designate one as primary. This is the one that matters, because when you're communicating like that, there isn't a way of sequencing them. They don't have meaning. They all weigh the same amount.
Right.
But there is a way of saying if you're only going to use one, because some people can only use one. Adam was talking about when they have one in the shop, they will put in one place, and it's a way of saying to him, this is where we think it should be its main section. But there's no weight in theme subject categories or qualifiers. I hope that addresses those questions.
Yes, it does. Thank you. And then moving on to number of qualifiers. How many? Is there a maximum number of well, the actual question was, is there a maximum number of thema codes that should be added, or can we add as many as we like that are relevant, as long as the most relevant are first? And the same question for qualifier codes.
The answer to can you add as many as you want is absolutely no. This is not a list of keywords.
No.
This is a subject classification scheme designed to help people in the supply chain discover and sell more books. The more you add, the less they become useful. We do give guidelines. So for the subject categories, we recommend between 1 to 4, 5. Once you go over the 5 or 6 subject categories, you're going too far, and you should start saying, I need to put some of these concepts into my descriptive metadata or into my keywords. The same principle applies to each type of qualifier. But we also have an overall guideline, and we've tried this out. We think about 10 or 11 of everything is when you're hitting the ceiling. So if the combination of subject categories and qualifiers, you get up to about 10, 11, you're probably at enough. If some of you have worked with Thema for a while, you know, for example, for books aimed at teenagers, what some people call young adults, you could probably have 3 subjects and, you know, quite easily get up to the 7 qualifiers, because there are various aspects, but that's probably enough. So try and remember that. Don't be scared to put 1 subject category and 1 qualifier, for example.
Would you say less is more?
Yeah, remember what they're for.
Yeah.
There are other ways of communicating. Think about your descriptive metadata. Very important. Think about keywords for those that still use keywords. But think about that and remember what Thema isn't. It isn't a system. It isn't a glossary of keywords.
And remember your recipient of that data as well. So on which point I'm going to go to Adam for this, and then also Liam. So Adam, your thoughts on, have you had instances where you've just seen too many codes and it's too much, or do you tend not to, being that further down the supply chain, do you tend not to get that? And maybe that's more of a Liam question.
Yeah, so for the shop, the actual for our stock control system can only take 1 subject. It can't take any qualifiers. I can look up subject, but I can't look up qualifiers. I can look up qualifiers through other sources, but stock control systems generally only have 1 category for things. So that's what, when Chris was talking about the main category, it is critical to get that right. And I would recommend putting that deep down. So for my rugby union book, I'd put rugby union as that example, even though it will be mapped into mine as sport. That's just how the system works. So putting the best category for the book for the main category is critical. For the website, on the other hand, I get all that information. And what I have to do is I have to sense check, and I have to delete a lot of things that I don't think are relevant and going to confuse my customers. An example, I think there's something that's come up in the Q&A, is using adult qualifiers for children's books. So I then have to go and say, get all these children's books out of my nature section, because someone's decided that that this book doesn't have children's qualifier, when in fact the children's ones are probably better, or well, not better, let's get it right. There are probably more children's subject categories than adult ones. My least favorite, Chris knows this one, is the use of gift for a book when it's not really a gift book, because every book's a gift book or can be a gift book. So that's a terrible thing that we find. But yeah, going back to having lots and lots of things. No, I tend to delete more things than I would want to when I put things on my website, just because it's,
Too much.
yes, that's right. Or often there's repeating. So if it's again, a lot of the children's categories, you'll find that there's some of the children's fiction subject categories also have corresponding other categories that could go into that you think that's just duplicating it. And one could be a fiction category and one could be a non-fiction category.
Okay.
Now, when it goes to qualifiers, it's those age qualifiers that are ideal. I think more about that later.
Yes, yes. Liam, being at Nielsen, I guess you see quite a lot of codes and qualifiers coming through. Would that be a fair statement?
I think that's a very fair statement, Karina.
An understated statement.
So we see everything, so there's no hiding. We see everything that's sent via sort of Onyx feeds. So we do see many subject and qualifier codes being sent through to us. And one of the common trends that I noticed is that we see lots of codes from the same hierarchy being sent through. And I think there's a misunderstanding of how the hierarchy works. So it's great because it's flexible in terms of if you would like to go top level, say, to give an example, number 2 place qualifiers. So if you want to go top level with a country such as United States of America, you can go with 1 KBB for United States of America. But then the hierarchy drills down so that you can go to state level and then city, town. Lots of times I see country, county, state, city, area of a city all being used. So my advice really is to be as specific as you can. So if you have a book on, say, New York City, there is a very well-defined specific code for New York City. Use that place qualifier. Don't use that in conjunction with United States of America, New York State. It just adds a lot of noise to your classification data. So just be aware that the hierarchy is there to give you options, but just don't pick every single option under the same sort of umbrella of a hierarchy.
To be specific.
Absolutely.
And don't effectively duplicate.
Yes, because the lower down a code goes into the hierarchy, you can see it contains the sort of the core code of that hierarchy. So it is duplication, it's additional noise, and it just it confuses things slightly. And it, as Chris has already said, there's a sort of a guideline for the number of Thema subject codes and qualifier codes that you should be aiming for. So the more specific you can be in terms of applying qualifier codes, the sort of cleaner and less noisy your classification data is on your title metadata.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just say something
Yes.
about the whole hierarchy things? The hierarchy is there to give detail, but there's no weight. Again, there's no weight via level, because you should go to, as Liam just said, you should go to the most appropriate level that describes the content of your book. So if it's about New York City, use New York City code. But if it's about New York State, use New York State. If it's about the Mid-Atlantic states, use that code. You don't need all of them because they're in the code. That's what the code is made up of. And it's a code to code system. Everybody they will already know it's there. They don't need that. Okay. So there's no, we see this a lot as well, of a misunderstanding about hierarchical systems. People think you need to put the hierarchy and you don't. The same applies with BISAC, which has got a very clear word-based hierarchy. You do not need to put each level above in that because they're already in the words, and that's how Thema works. It's already in the codes. So pick the one. The systems do the rest.
Yes. Let the machines do the work.
Yeah, I can
Okay.
concur with I
Oh,
can concur with that. If for my website, if it does say New York City, I can make the decision whether I want to include things that are higher up. But I
mm,
can make that just from the New York City code. I can decide if I want to say I want this to be in the Americas, or if I want to say in the United States, or if I want to say I can make that decision at the other end.
yeah.
So just by using the most specific code only, it's up to me and how I map it.
Yeah. Good point. Um, I've gone through quite a few of the questions that we had in advance and a couple of the sort of the warm-up questions that we had as well. We're getting quite a nice little group of questions now in the Q&A. So I'm just going to go through go through some of those. Let's have a look and see what we've got. So is there a way to classify non-fiction, for example, puzzle books with a particular theme, for example, horror, detective, etc., without using fiction codes? Take that.
I could have a philosophical debate about whether puzzles are fiction or non-fiction.
We've only got an hour.
Because, but that's important.
Yeah.
First of all, use the code WDK, which is for puzzle books and quizzes. Make that your main subject, and then use the horror code. It doesn't matter if it says fiction in front of it. Fiction's just implying that this is more storytelling, but unless you've got a puzzle book that's actually about ghosts, we have a code for ghosts in the V section, which doesn't say whether it's fiction or non-fiction. So
even
yes.
if it's a puzzle book, a factual puzzle book on those themes.
Well, if it's a
That's
factual
okay.
puzzle book about topics like that, then you find the relevant code, like one of the V ones for the supernatural, true crime if it's about genuine crime cases, things like that. But pick the WDK, I think it is WDK as your primary or main subject.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I just say
yeah.
with that fiction non-fiction divide, one of the beauties of Thema and that using it properly with the main subject, and as with things that we're now seeing more of a crossover where people are being more fluid with their genres, you're giving information. You can say, this is a puzzle book where I'm presenting stuff about horror stories, and those horror stories may be traditional stories that people say are based on truth or not. You're
Yeah.
not implying that. You're just giving a way of classifying books.
While we're looking at these questions, can I just say there is to our attendees, you can, if you want, at least I think we've enabled it, we'll find out. You can upvote the questions. So if you can see you should be able to see other people's questions. So if you do want to, if you see a question you like the sound of, and you really want us to answer that question, you can upvote it in the Q&A box. So feel free to do that if you want to. You don't have to, but if you'd like to do that, please do that. So, okay, so we've answered the first question. So the next question we have then is, let me just have a quick look at it. Okay, so this person asking the question is aware that the general guidance is to not mix adult and children's Thema codes. However, if you absolutely must mix adult and children's codes, for example, for a colouring book with a genuine crossover appeal, to what extent can they be mixed? For example, mixing YBGC and WFX is probably not the end of the world, but should a Thema age qualifier be combined with an adult audience code? Or could that cause severe visibility issues on both sides? Who wants to take that?
Liam.
I think I can answer half of it with sort of certainty and clarity. So we do see, especially colouring books, are sort of aimed at both adults or children's teen audiences. So my practical advice for classifying uh, anything like this, where you've got two clear audiences that you're trying to appeal to, is make sure that you have consistent classification in terms of the subject being for either adult, I mean, the main or primary thema code should be either the WFX for adult or YBGC for children. And when you are sending through data for the audience, make sure that you have matched the audience with the primary thema code. So if you've used an adult thema subject code, you're matching your first audience code would be the adult code, but then make sure that you can also have the children's subject code. So WFX is primary, but then put your YBGC directly after it as a supplementary thema subject code. And in terms of the audience, your primary audience will be general, but it can be supplemented with J for juvenile, for example. So it is, I can understand a bit of conflict here, but as long as you are clear, you pick a lane, you can have both, but you've just got to be really clear in terms of what your primary classification is.
Yeah, for the audience information, what Liam's talking about is, for example, in Onyx, you give a main audience, like you do with the main subject. So you say your main audience is general. I would avoid using 5A qualifiers with adult titles. Um, the the 5A have a specific purpose to qualify the Y codes. There
Which will come
are
on
there are a
to
couple of
one sec.
exceptions to that, but I would these universal appeal things, I think you've got, as Liam said, you've got to prick who are your primary audience? Who are you really marketing it to? Who is likely to buy it? And think that's got to be my primary subject. Because it'll also, as Adam is probably going to tell us, it's going to cause conflict in bookshops if you give too much ambiguity in that,
Yeah.
Adam.
Adam, saw you had your thumb up there about not mixing. Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
not using age qualifiers, I think it was.
for adult
For
books.
this,
Yes.
yeah.
So for for our website, when we get age qualifiers, we actually use that as from 5 plus, 6 plus, 7 plus, 8 plus. So to have 17 plus, I would expect it's got sort of possibly some naughty content in there, something like that, for so that we don't want to give it for younger children, rather than say it's suitable for 17 plus, because what adult book isn't suitable for 17 plus? We would use 17 plus as a warning that it might have some content in it that we don't want to let a 14 or 15-year-old see. So those certainly the high end that are getting approaching adult age. To me, that's a warning sign rather than a good sign if that's the sort of thing you're looking for various reasons. So I don't think age range for adult books is a good idea. And of course, we flag it on our website that
Mm.
for the age range. Um, in the shop itself, we use that a lot. We need the younger age groups so that we can not necessarily for experienced booksellers because they can look at a book and say, okay, that's suitable for a 9-year-old. But sometimes for our newer booksellers, it's really, really a good idea to have something they can see to help recommend.
Thank you. Some of these have been upvoted, so I'm just seeing which ones are most popular. So we're going to ask the one that's currently most popular. When should you use place qualifiers? When a place is featured in a book, when a place is a significant part of a book, or when a book is solely about that place?
When I'm looking for a book on Paris, I want to find a book on Paris. I don't want, I use this as an example because somebody once asked me this in training. They had a children's book where the children were traveling from one country to another, but they stopped over in the airport. There was a chapter in the airport at Paris. And they said, should they use the Paris qualifier? And I said, would I learn anything about Paris or just about being in an airport? Nothing. So think about what you're trying to tell people. You're looking for a book that gives you something. The setting is Paris and you of your novel, and you learn something about Paris, or the book is about Paris. If your book deals substantially with several places and you come away knowing more about those places in some way, then use those. But what we don't want is people to list, the train passes through Birmingham, or
Yeah.
not to use it like that, but to think about, because the beauty is if you use it one correctly, it's as Adam used the earlier, Verona. We could find we're going to Verona and we want to know everything about Verona. So we could find all the novels. We can go beyond Romeo and Juliet and find everything that there is, and then we can choose. So
So if you had
sorry.
sorry, if you had a fiction title, and it was set in, let's say, New York, but it could have been set anywhere. New York wasn't necessarily intrinsic or material to the characters or the plot. Would you include New York as a place qualifier?
Good question. I Depends how neutral it is, because there's also always going to be an essential. If, for example, if the author's from the US and is writing about, there's going to be a New York and New Yorkness to that
Mm,
title.
yeah,
So, I mean, some of these things are judgment based,
yeah.
but
And it may be
um,
that you've got other qualifiers that describe that book
yeah,
better
yeah,
than if you
yes,
were trying to limit the use of how many codes, you might
yeah.
think, well, you can tell it's set in New York by the description on the back or by the description on the website or
Well, if you're putting it in the description, then it must be a key element.
true.
Because we've all read things where it could be anywhere, anytime.
Yeah.
Therefore, you don't use place or time period. But if you're putting in the description the fact that it's set in New York, then that must be an
And that's
aspect.
important.
New York must be one of the characters
Yeah.
of the novel.
Okay. But if it's not, and it's not in the
Then
description, then at
don't.
your discretion, really.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry, Karina, can I
Yeah,
just
Liam,
jump
yeah.
in and add something to this? We've kind of touched upon sort of use of place qualifiers in fiction titles, but from my experience, place qualifiers are also incredibly useful for non-fiction, and we don't always see them applied for non-fiction titles. So, for example, they're great for books on archaeology, which obviously covers specific places, and combined with time qualifiers, you can give some really fine detail as to where a book is set. So the as I say, the place and time range can be very important for history titles as well.
Yeah.
Um, there's also law. I think people forget that you can have national law books. So you could have a book on constitutional law of France. And adding the place qualifier for France is quite significant here to denote the area in which the sort of the law covers. And it probably is an obvious area as well, but again, sometimes it doesn't always come through. But travel guides are the obvious place to use place qualifiers, and sometimes we see them. But as I mentioned earlier, we do tend to get lots of top level codes. So if it's a city guide for Prague, give us the code for Prague. Don't um, go top level when there is a very perfectly specific code that you can use.
Yeah. And don't assume that because it's in the title that that's enough.
Um, I have a training example I use, which is A History of Europe by Norman Davis, which is a genuine history of Europe, one of the rare books that actually is. And we have a subject code which is perfect for that. That's all you need. But by adding the one, I think it's 1D for Europe, there's a qualifier for Europe. it may seem like it's redundant, but it isn't, because it means that, and I think this links into a question later on, it means that you can filter everything. If you're looking for everything that deals with Europe as a whole, so you want history, politics, travel guides, fiction, you've got that qualifier and you can use it. So those place qualifiers are powerful. And I totally agree with what Liam's saying about nonfiction. I mean, that's where they're mostly designed for, is for nonfiction. I always think the fiction is a nice extra. So
Okay, and Adam, place qualifiers, what do you get a lot of that information through? Do you use them, or how do you use them as a bookseller?
Generally, in the shop, probably not that often.
Yeah,
Although it is something that if we're doing research, we could use uh, we can use Nielsen to look up place qualifiers
yeah,
if we want to do that. The website is a big a real example of something like that, because I can have a book up there and it has links of I can use Thema Qualifiers as links so that the customer can see they've looked up a book, and one of the links might be go back to the example we've used so far, Verona, and they can see on that book it says Verona. They can click on that and they can find other books as long as they've been set up.
yeah.
You know, as long as it's there, that information's there. They can move from one section to another section to another section through a website very easily, if those, as long as I put them on there and the publisher's given that information.
Yeah, okay. As long, so yeah, but the sort of the emphasis there is really that if you don't get that information, you can't do anything with it.
Absolutely,
You don't,
absolutely.
yeah.
Both in fiction and non-fiction. I mean, I don't want to have to spend all that time on a non-fiction book that should obviously have it
Yes.
and have to add it later myself.
Yeah.
It'd be so much better if the experts have done that already for me.
Yes.
And that includes travel, as been mentioned. Fiction, I mean, I don't get a chance to read every fiction book I've got, and if it is really important for the place, yeah, I'd love that information if that was already there, provided
Brilliant.
by the experts,
Yep.
publishers.
Great. Absolutely. Thank you. We mentioned there, or Chris, I think, mentioned training. I just want to do, just to make the attendees aware that there is another BIC session that editor provide the training for on Thema on the 15th and the 16th of April. It's online. If any attendees are interested, that's on the 15th and 16th of April. It's over 2 half days. And I think Joe is going to put the link to that registration for those of you that might be interested into the chat soon, if it's not already there, which it might be. I think it is. Yes, it's already there. Excellent. Thank you, Joe. Okay, so let's have a look, see what other questions we've got. So let's have a look at the most popular. Okay, here's one. I would like to know more about time period qualifiers. What is the best practice? So, for example, for a history book, should you use qualifiers for all the centuries covered for a book? Is it better to find a named period, or better to use a combination of both? I didn't read the whole question because in the interest of time. Who wants to take that?
time periods, like place qualifiers, it's got to think about relevancy. So do I want to, am I learning about the 19th century or am I just learning about the 1820s? So a thing like that. It doesn't matter if you pick a slightly larger period. It's to give people an idea of which period. Am I looking at the 14th century or am I looking at the 18th century kind of thing? The difference between named periods and times. So named periods are what we call national extensions. So they are supposed to be for significant periods of time where there's a lot of books about that period of time by name. So in England, a lot of books on the Tudors. In Mexico, a lot of books on the period of the Mexican Revolution, because there are a lot of history books, politics, poetry, philosophy, etc. If you've got a book if you use one of those named periods of time, it implies your book is about that particular named period of time. So it's about the Tudor period. It's about the Mexican Revolutionary period. If you've got a doubt, just go for the general ones. I think we've got the whole of time, and we've even gone into the future with the time periods. But again, think about relevancy to your audience. Because if you pick the 1840s and your book starts in 1837 and finishes in 1852, it's fine. You could go for a bit larger, or you could go for that's a judgment, but it's to give guidance to people. That's my finish.
Liam, any thoughts? Thank you for that, Chris. Any observations on?
Yeah, just to kind of sort of echo what Chris has just said, select the qualifier range that sort of best suits your title. Um, so if your title does cover multiple centuries, in practice, having 4 to 5 qualifiers each for each individual century is quite excessive, and it creates a bit of noise on your record. So you might then consider going up a level. So anything for the 16th to the 21st century, you could go up to the sort of modern period qualifier, which is 3M, which is 1500 onwards to present day. So I think, as Chris has said, just pick the most specific qualifier that covers the area, the date range of interest for your title. Don't go too broad, because then you're at risk of sort of losing your potential readership if you are just not specific enough. And I know Chris has mentioned the national extensions, but they are useful for any context. So there are other time qualifiers, such as for periods of war. So World War One, World War Two are great to use. There are other codes, obviously, subject codes that you can use for these, but never forget that if your subject surrounds an event, time qualifiers are really great ways of really kind of letting your readership know when they were set.
Throw in another thing which people forget. If your novel is set in 2025, don't be scared to use the contemporary period qualifier, because first of all, then people know it's set in a contemporary period, but also later on, we know it's set in the period. If the contemporary setting is important, it's quite good to know the setting.
Okay. We're gonna go on to the 5As in a minute, but just before we do, just wanted to ask this one. So this question is, you've mentioned that there's no weight to different parts of the hierarchy, but is there a level at which codes are too general? Because we're talking a bit about zooming in and zooming out here, so I thought I would ask this one. For example, is something like DC poetry poems still helpful, or does it need to be more specific to be useful?
Absolutely not. The only ones that aren't useful are the top levels, because the top levels are designed to build the hierarchy off. Adam could use the top level in his bookshop site because he might have a small section, but not qualifiers. DC's a really good one, poems, poetry, because having been an ex-bookseller, run the poetry section. That's what you do. Most of the books you put in poetry, and then you sort it by the poet. So you're going to give the other information. What matters is who wrote it, maybe the content and things. Look at that in context. But no, there general codes are for general books. They're not. That's what I mean by no weight. They're to say this is a book about poetry or poems, or a collection of poetry or poems, or it's a broad book about maths. Because when you go,
That can be enough.
That's fine, because that's what we often are looking for, broad topics as well. So the further you go down, the more detailed they get, because we're trying to give this is a breakdown of the subject. And so if you go back up the hierarchy of codes, your book still ends up in the right subject. But that's what I mean by no weight. DC is no more important than sorry, I can't remember. For a quick look at one. DC is no more important than DCRH, so which is caligrams.
Okay. Just looking at the time, we've only got half an hour left, if you can believe that. So I'm going to focus a little bit now, zoom in a little bit more on 5A, and then go to Liam for a general question on interest qualifiers versus subject codes. So if we go first to 5A, we hear 5A a lot, at least in certainly some of our BIC meetings and in the Thema International Steering Committee, etc., etc. For those on the call that don't know what 5A is, what is it? What is 5A? What are these qualifiers and how best to use them? In particular, I think there's a conversation around the 18 plus category and what do we mean by that, etc., etc. So who wants to start? I think this will be for everybody, this for all of our speakers, but who would like to start? Adam.
I'll start on this one. The theme is really good in the way the children's categories are laid out and all the different subjects. I know that a lot of independent bookshops certainly don't put children's fiction, at least, in subject matter. We do it age ranging. So our children's books are age range. So we'll have a preschool section, or what do? We have a board book section, preschool section, which is picture books, and then we have we use age 5 to 8, and then 9 to 12, and then teen. That's our shops. Other shops use, they might break it at 9 instead of 8 or whatever. We make those decisions ourselves individually. But what we don't do is we don't put all of the animal stories together, even though that's what thema subjects are. So we desperately need those qualifiers to tell us where the best ones are, or we've got to sit there and make a decision ourselves with them. And that goes particularly when we're going to do the teen books, when they do start getting naughty, and when they're 15 plus, 16 plus, 17 plus, when we think, hang on, let's not call this teen, let's put that into the young adult section. So they're really important for us in that sense, because that's how we put our books together. As wonderful as the subject categories are for fiction, and that's really useful too, to say this is an animal story for an 8-year-old, that's brilliant. But our bookshops are put together by age, and that is relatively normal for independent bookshops. Not exclusive, but normal.
Okay, and so sort of going back to the thing we were talking a little bit about numbers, adding those 5A or interest at their age qualifiers, adding those codes could increase the number of codes added to each title each time. So one of these questions that came in from our attendees in advance of the session was clarification of why those 5As, those age qualifiers might be required or might always be required is good. I think you've kind of already answered that, Adam, but if you'd like to just sort of be...
I can say why they're required.
Okay. Yeah.
So every single Y code must have a 5A with it, must have one 5A. Thema doesn't have words for things like, we often use the term young adult, but it's ambiguous. It doesn't have the same meaning. It varies in context, it varies in language, it varies in culture. And Thema is a global scheme, so we use numbers because everybody understands the concept of 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's what they're there for. The 5A replaces words like juvenile, middle grade, teen, young adult, and you put them there so that people know. And they give meaning to the Y codes. So they are fundamental to making sure the Y codes make sense.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you've put it in other metadata, which you should have, because age range is really important in children's. It's a fundamental part of making sure Thema works. And in your 5s, I mean, as I said earlier, 5s, it's very easy to go up to 5 or 6 qualifiers. So that's fine. But yeah, always take it into account with the why that you will need a 5A, one 5A.
Okay. And sort of on a similar theme, Chris, age ranges generally what to do and what not to do, and examples of new adult.
Yes, the term we've come up with because we've used
which
the
is
term
subjective.
it come up because we've used the term young adult in our industry to mean teenagers. So new adult is what what people call adults who are young, but it's can't. So there is a way of expressing this in Thema. We have two special qualifiers. We created a special 5A. So you can say, I have written this content. The content is specifically aimed at that 17 to 29. I call it the Club Med age range. And it's there because otherwise we would have to have created lots of different new adult subject categories, and they have different meanings to different people. So that's one of the 5As that's an exception to you could use it with an adult code. And we also have a whole series of qualifiers starting with 5L. 5L are, my book is about this stage of life. So this is a book about people at the end, older people. This book is about
Middle
tweens.
age.
And then there is one, so you can say that this book is about people who are in early adulthood. And so it's the aboutness. And so if you're writing what people are calling new adults, so you're writing about those people who are just leaving home, having their first adventures, often quite sexual content, you could also use the 5LKE qualifier to say it's about that age range.
Okay.
And there's a big difference. So between the 5Ls and the 5As. But they're both very useful.
Would you use those together?
Oh, you could do. I mean, you could have a book that's targeted at early adults and is also specifically written for early adults. And even more so when you're going and dealing with books for children's or teens. But at the same time, you might use the teen one in something aimed at adults, how to deal with your teenager, aimed at parents kind of book as well.
Yep, good point. Okay, thank you. I'm going to move over to Liam now on the confusion sometimes between interest qualifiers and subject codes. What are some of the interest codes, the interest qualifiers that people should be aware of? Where are you seeing that sort of misuse, if you like, for want of a better word? So using them as subject codes.
Sure, Karina. I can give you a very specific example to kick off. So whenever we see titles which relate to the life experience of a particular gender, so female or male, we do see a variety of combination of subject codes and qualifier codes being used. So there is a subject code for gender studies, and that can drill down into girls and women, and there's another code for boys and men. So when you have, say, a fiction title which a strong theme is life experience of women, for example, we sometimes see the J subject code for the gender studies being applied to it, whereas there has been a wonderful 5P interest qualifier added on the sort of the latest version of Thema, which is specifically it relates to the life experience of a particular gender. So you've got 5PN relating to life experience of women, girls and women, and then 5PP relating to life experience of boys and men. There's also a 5 interest qualifier, which indicates when a subject matter is intended for a particular audience, so subject matter intended for girls or women. Again, it can be quite limiting to use that. If it's a sort of a say like a growing up guide, good advice guide on, say, women's health, then yes, it's perfectly acceptable to go with the subject matter intended for girls, women qualifier code. But if your subject or your content talks more to the life experience, then use the 5P life experience code, and don't look at mixing or using, sorry, the JB gender studies code, because again, it kind of dilutes the intent or purpose of what you're trying to get at.
Yeah. Okay. Do you see that very often?
Yes,
Yes.
we do. I think because Thema is such a flexible scheme, and you can look at every part of the scheme and sort of add in any code from anywhere, there is a tendency, say, to do like a keyword search and to throw in every single code that mentions girls, for example. So you're probably hoping that if you put all of them in, you're going to have like a 10% chance of hitting the thing that you're trying to convey, but it actually kind of dilutes that, and it just kind of makes it. I keep using the word noisy, but I think it's quite a good analogy just to say, like, you can be really specific using the Thema classification scheme. And so why not actually be specific and actually hone in on what you want to convey so that it does get across to your intended readership and make people actually buy the books, which they can relate to more because they can see that actually this book relates to my gender, my ethnic group, my religious group. They're all interest qualifiers for all these different types of people, and they are so powerful and so underused that they really could sort of make a difference between your book being missed out by your intended audience.
Yeah.
The two codes, the 5JA subject matter intended specifically for women or girls, and the 5JB for men or boys, very, very powerful qualifiers. But as Liam said, only should be used when they're really there. They were designed so when you promote like health books, when a health book is written specifically for women or girls, and it's targeted, it's a way of identifying those books, but they do get used. The 5JA gets used an awful lot just because people say, oh, I'm targeting a female audience with my book. But that's not what it's about. It's about this is a health book, or how to break the glass ceiling, like a book specifically written and giving advice to one gender. That's what those are for. And it's always a shame when they're misused, because when you do want to use them, they've been diluted with too much noise, as Liam says.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Good to get that clarification and to understand that can be an issue, and it's not what the subject codes, all the qualifiers are intended for. More of a general question now. I know the answer to this, but I'm going to give it to Chris. And this is coming on the Q&A box, how often does editor add new qualifiers, and what's that process like?
So the Thema gets an update on a cycle of 2 years. This is an additions only, so both subject categories and qualifiers are added. We're currently working on what will be version 1.7. That will be due out in October. The process is that we receive either they're sent directly to editor or they go to our national groups. The United Kingdom is represented through BIC. So we compile a list of all the proposals, and then we look at them. We form a working group from different countries and from different parts of the supply chain, and then we go through everything in great detail. We spend a lot of time thinking, actually, can you do this? Is this just another way of saying the same thing? Is this just a trend? We did a whole working group on romance tropes to see what actually is just something that should be keywords and what could be a new subject code. So it's a very thorough process. That's it.
Great, thank you. We've still got a few open questions, so let's see if we can deal with those. So we have this question has come in. Is there a metadata schema that overlays both Thema and BISAC codes while incorporating keywords optimized for major platforms like KDP to maximize discoverability for non-fiction or fiction books? If not, what would be the logic for figuring that out? That's a big question.
That's that's not, that will be somebody building something like that to make use BISAC, Thema, keywords, the different parts of metadata.
Yes.
So
So
for example, if you put
currently.
BISAC codes, if you put Thema codes or keywords into your Onyx file, then an Onyx, there's ways of verifying that the Onyx file is correct. But what sounds like the person is asking here is if there's something, it's something that third parties might do as a commercial solution to help people. There are organizations that, they do various things to help people manage their metadata. But BISAC is a very different scheme from Thema. BISAC has a different purpose. It was designed for selling books in the United States. It's got it's word-based. It's got pre-coordinated shelf labels. Theme is an international scheme based on codes and post-coordination. And then keywords is keywords. It's a jungle out there with the keywords and so on.
Okay, thank you. I just thought we should ask it, seeing as it's there. Then we're down to this one. Is there any issue with an FX narrative theme qualifier as the main code? Or will the system view any attached F star code as the main F star, then one FX star as the main FX star, one star qualifier as the main one, etc., etc., with as many main codes as there are types of code qualifier?
We don't recommend using FX as the main because it's a narrative theme and you want to say what's a narrative theme of. I mean, but it doesn't break Onyx rules because it's a code. It's not an absolute no, you mustn't use it. It's just probably not recommended. Just because people are looking mostly for a main, they're looking for it's going to be contemporary fiction or it's going to be something. It's more because people are looking for that. And narrative themes were originally designed to complement the FB, which is fiction, non-genre fiction, which is the biggest area, what some people call literary fiction or contemporary fiction, whatever you want to call it. So they were designed for that, as supplements to that, but they can be used on other fictions as well. So it doesn't break the rules, but it may not be the most useful. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm whizzing through these because unbelievably we have 12 minutes left. So I'm just going to go back to some we had before. So oh yes, qualifiers as marketing tools. This is Chris's favorite subject, or least favorite subject. Why is this a bad idea? And can you give some examples?
When you're applying a subject category or a qualifier to a book, it should be something you're comfortable with applying before you publish the book and will remain with the book for the rest of its life. So if you use any of the qualifiers, it's because whenever somebody encounters that book and the metadata attached, it still works. And there is an overlap with some of the qualifiers. So there are things like there's a qualifier for Christmas, there's a qualifier for Mother's Day, etc. And the idea is that it's so that people can identify books that are about that subject or really relate to that. So it's something that a bookseller could say, well, we're doing a Mother's Day promotion and here are some of the books, plus we're also going to look into other books that we know about. There are ways, for example, in the United States, the BISG has a separate list of codes that they call merchandising codes, which are things that publishers can put in their metadata specifically for the buyers at big stores, etc., who are organizing promotions. And that could be anything. And they are supposed to be things that you change constantly and do that. But the qualifiers should be something you're comfortable putting with and leaving with your book the whole time. I mean, if you want to use the Mother's Day code, it's because you're comfortable that this would be something about Mother's Day or really relates to Mother's Day.
It describes the content.
Yeah.
It's not a good present for Mother's. It could be a good present for Mother's Day, but it's not
Yeah. I
designed
mean,
for that purpose.
mothers are, geology book could be a good present. Depends on,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
As Adam said earlier, all books make good gifts. Every mother is unique, but these are books about the celebration, the
The day,
festival,
yeah,
etc.
the Mother's Day, Christmas, about
Yeah.
Easter, about whatever. Yeah. Okay. Liam, do you see that very often in your experience? The data you see coming through? I think I know the answer.
Yeah, especially for fiction titles
Yeah,
aimed at certain celebrations or holidays throughout the year.
yeah.
As Chris has said, just be aware that it will stick to that title for its lifespan. So just be very careful when you apply those qualifiers.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to stay with you, Liam. I want to ask a question about sustainability. So, question we had in from our registrants when they were registering for the event, one of them was, as an academic science publisher, most of our books touch on one or more SDGs. Should we only use these qualifiers when SDGs are specifically called out in the text, or for any book that substantially covers material relevant to advancing that SDG?
So from my perspective, I would apply the SDG qualifier when there's a specific mention of it, either in the title or from the summary description of the book. I know that there are 17 in total. So, and some titles will focus on one or two specific SDGs. My advice, as always, will be to make sure that you're as concise and accurate as possible. So, if there is specific mention to three of them, apply the three individual 5YS qualifiers. But if you're covering more than three, perhaps go top level with just 5YS. Otherwise, you're just listing out.
Single one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would add in on that because the UN, because these are UN goals, SDGs. So they have SDG book clubs in various countries. So a lot of kids' books go on those, for example. So if you've got a book that deals with the topic and advances one of the SDG goals, so you don't actually have to mention the SDG goal, but if it fits in and advances, then use the relevant one or ones. If your book is just about the SDGs in general, then you can use the top level qualifier, the 5YS. But it's a powerful way that the UN organizations and then these various bodies, you find a lot of countries in Africa and Asia have these book lists, and they can be very interesting. So it's a way for them to discover those.
Okay.
Because that's what we have to remember with qualifiers. They're really powerful way for discovering things across subjects and across ages.
Thank you. 7 minutes. We're trying to get through them all. Have you seen any demand from booksellers or publishers for a Thema version of BISAC merchandising codes? If not Thema, how would you recommend conveying those themed keywords, for example?
So we have seen some from Pharonics to do something about this. It's harder for an international one than because BISAC has the advantage of just being for the US, being for one market. So I think if we added them to Thema, it would cause confusion with the qualifiers. And they're because they're more about marketing. At the moment, yes, I'd use some of the keywords and descriptive text for those. But yeah, I mean, there is an interest in how to make that difference between here we're marketing it to. I mean, there's a descriptive text in Onyx which you can describe potential audience. But yeah, I don't. So there's been questions, but there's no answer to that yet. I do think if it was in theme, I wonder if that would confuse. As I said, I wonder if that would confuse people about the usage, and maybe it needs to be something like an Onyx list or something. But it's potentially very powerful. But the
Yeah.
BIC ones are there, and sadly not used as much as they could be, even in a market like the US. So.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to talk about non-book products now. Again, this was a question we had ahead of this session from one of the one of the attendees. I'm going to ask Adam. So, how should non-book products be classified when they are the supplemental material to an existing book product? Is there a benefit to classifying them as a book as well? Or would it be more effective to classify them as a toy? It's almost a trick question.
Almost a trick question, yeah. I think the issue we have with non-book products is just varying rates of VAT. And that's obviously essential for us to do that. So if books are zero rated and non-books have VAT on them, it's important that I've got the right classification. So if it's something like a calendar, I need to make sure that it's got calendar as part of as the main subject. So that if it's a history calendar or an art calendar, it absolutely needs to be done as a calendar first. If it is a toy or a jigsaw puzzle, then we need those categories to be primary category or the main category. Let's get the wording right. So that is critical for us, so that we don't get upset with the taxman, or the taxman doesn't get upset with us.
Also, I
If
think,
it's
sorry, go
go
on.
on.
No, go.
So if it's a mixed product, that's always a challenge, because if it's a book and a toy that goes with it, again, ideally it should be a toy for the VAT reason, and then we've got to work out what the difference is, how much it's got on there.
I think to mention as well is that the Thema code is for the subject, not for the form
Yeah,
as well. So it's about it's describing the subject or the topic of the item, not the the form of the item. Whether it's
There are two specific Thema code areas: WZ for adults, YZ for kids. Very broad, general. It's a way of saying, look, pay attention. This is not actually a book, even though it's not form. They were added deliberately so that there wouldn't be a confusion in the supply chain about that.
okay.
The form is dealt with in Onyx or other metadata.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, we've got 3 minutes left. Let's have a look at, we've got a couple of questions still. How specific should you get when using qualifier codes, Liam? You've kind of touched on this already,
Yeah.
but anything else to add to what you've already said, or?
I would just probably go back to kind of the top of the session and just really promote the Thema browser and just have a look to see what is on there and what has been added, because obviously Thema updates every 18 months. Because if you're using old versions or sort of in-house lists, you might be missing out on something very specific in terms of qualifiers that is really useful for you in order to get your book discovered. So just really see what is available to you and just kind of always be curious and inquisitive and reach out and ask for sort of help if you can.
Okay, brilliant. I think that's probably a good note to end on. The asking for help if you can. So we're out of time. So let me just remind everyone. So hopefully you can see my screen. So just want to wrap up for today. We had a few more questions, but I think we've largely covered most of them. I'd say we've covered about 95% of everything we had. We've certainly covered all the questions that came in ahead of the session, and I think all but one of the questions that came in on the Q&A screen. So thank you to everyone. Just like to take this opportunity then to say a massive thank you to our three speakers today, our three experts. So on behalf of everyone in attendance and on behalf of BIC, massive thank you to Liam, Adam and Chris for your knowledge, your expertise, your detailed knowledge and experience, and also to thank you for taking time to prepare for this session today. So hopefully our attendees have found it really, really helpful and informative. As already mentioned, the recording of this session will be sent to all of our attendees as soon as possible. So given that we're a Thursday today, that will probably be sometime next week. So if you haven't received it by tomorrow, don't panic. It is on its way. We're also going to post it to our YouTube channel. I think I mentioned at the top of the session. So in about a month, if you're signed up to our mailing list, the link I think will be coming up soon. You'll get notification of that. And notification of upcoming BIC webinars. So the next BIC webinar will be on a slightly different topic. And for those that are interested in accessibility, our next BIC Brunch webinar will be on exactly that. So that will be on Thursday, the 23rd of April. The title of that, if you're looking for it on our website or on Eventbrite or somewhere, is Accessibility Tackling the Backlist Mountain. A practical strategies for accessibility compliance. So it's the next in our series of accessibility webinars. If you want to see previous recordings of those particular webinars, they're also available on our YouTube channel. Also, just a reminder about our training, our Thema training. Next session is on the 15th and 16th of April. The training is done by the experts at Editor. So that, I believe, will be Chris for that session. So if you want to go and you haven't registered, please do so. The link was in the chat, so go and grab that. And then finally, just a reminder that the Thema webinars on YouTube, there's a whole wide range of them up there already, some of which you can see called out on your screen. So you can have a look. You don't have to be a BIC member to get access to those. They're all freely available. So please do go ahead. So finally, thank you to our attendees. Thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for attending today. Thank you for your questions. Yeah, please stay in touch. If you're not already signed up to our mailing list and would like to be, the link is on the screen. You can find out more about BIC and the work we do via this mailing list, and also in details of the training courses, the webinars, everything we do will be in those newsletters. So, or you can just go and have a look on our website if you'd prefer to do that. So we hope to see you at a BIC event at some point in the future. So until then, please do take care of yourselves and look forward to seeing you soon. All right, that's it. That's everything from us. So over and out and see you soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.